Genesis 30 and finish up the chapter there, 25 through 43. And as you're turning there, I'll share with you something I got to do this week for the first time since I've been on the school board in Marietta. I got a chance to go up to Columbus to interact with a bunch of state senators about some upcoming proposed changes to how schools are funded in Ohio. So a lot of fun stuff. So I get to go to like room to room, office to office, senator to senator, and sit down and discuss, hey, if you do this, then this is going to happen to us. If you do that, then that's going to happen to us here. Here are the consequences of some of these decisions, or the outcomes, the results of some of these decisions, and what that would look like in Marietta, Ohio. And so I was in an environment that I'll admit was a little out of my wheelhouse, sitting down with all of these politicians and things like that and talking about the school system and things like that. And I sat down with Democrat senators, I sat down with Republican senators, and got to have all of these conversations. And it was a really interesting thing to experience. But what do you think all of those guys and gals told me whenever I shared about our schools and discussed school funding? Well, they all sounded a lot alike. They sounded like politicians, right? We got your back. Don't you worry. We are looking out for your community. You are who we think of when we do our jobs, and we want what's best for you. And you felt like they were telling you everything that you wanted to hear. True politicians, right? They were good at their trade. And every time I left those meetings, those individual meetings with all of those people, which some of them seemed very sincere in what they were saying, but in the back of my mind, after sharing the smiles and the handshakes and the head nods, I'm thinking, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Because nobody in this room is naive enough to think that every promise you hear from a politician is going to be kept, right? We all know better than that by now, right? Because that's a world we live in. The world that we live in is that promises are made and promises are broken all of the time. Promises that you've made in your life, you've maybe not been able to keep them all. Promises that people have made to you, they haven't been able to keep them all. It's almost safer, I think, to assume that every promise is going to be broken. That way, when they're not, we can be pleasantly surprised. That's the pessimistic realist in me at times, because that's the world we live in. I heard someone say promises and pie crusts are made to be broken. It is safer to assume in a broken world with a bunch of fallen people that promises are going to be broken. But that's why when we're learning about God, we need the Bible. Because here's the mistake that you and I often make. We experience this world through this lens that we live with, this cultural lens, and we interact with people and have all of these different experiences. And when we think about God, here's the common error that all of us tend to make. We tend to project ourselves onto God, and then in that projection of who we are onto God, we assume that he thinks and acts in certain ways because we think that he must be like us. So when we need the Bible because it corrects that common error that all of us make. When we read the Bible, we learn that God is not like us. His thoughts are not like our thoughts. His works are not like our works. He's not a fallen sinner like us. When God says he's going to do something, he does it every single time. When he speaks, it happens. When he makes a promise, he fulfills that. And that's a truth that we learn from Genesis to Revelation, but we've been in this zoomed in portion of Genesis where we've been looking at the patriarchs, and we learn this truth over and over again in the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob. He makes promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he keeps those promises. So it's important for us to read about the promises that he makes and then read about how those promises come to fruition in the lives of those patriarchs so that we can know God's not like us. He always keeps his word. He's always true to what he says. What are the promises we've been studying about with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Well, there's promises of descendants, there's promises of land, a promise that they're going to have a special blessing upon their life, that they're going to prosper in this area. And we've seen all of those fulfilled in Abraham's life. We've seen those promises fulfilled in Isaac's life. And now here in Genesis 30, starting at verse 25, we're picking up on the life of Jacob. But have all of those promises been fulfilled in Jacob's life? Well, we know the descendants are coming along from our study last week. If you remember our study with Jacob and Rachel and Leah and their servants and how all that unfolded, he's got all kinds of kids running around right now. I mean, diaper duty must have been off the chain in Jacob's house. He's got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and Joseph most recently. We haven't got to Benjamin yet. He's around the corner. But we got 11 of them born and running around. So, wow, full house. But however, there's one promise that there's still a few promises we haven't seen yet. But one of the promises we're going to focus on today is there's no prosperity in the life of Jacob. He's not prospered in the way that these promises said he would. He's been in exile for going on like 20 years, getting close to 20 years. It will be a total of 20 years by the time he gets out of exile. But he's been working his butt off during this time in exile. Remember, he's in exile because he fears living near Esau, his twin brother, who he cheated, and he's afraid Esau's going to kill him, so that's why he took off to Uncle Laban's house. And Uncle Laban has been taking advantage of Jacob ever since. The only one that's prospered in this scenario since Jacob's been in exile is Uncle Laban. Laban has prospered. He has a ton of material blessings as a result of Jacob being in his life. But all of that's going to change today. In the passage we're reading, 25 through 43, it's this really, really strange story of how Jacob manages to prosper at the end of his time with Uncle Laban. And here's what I don't want you to see. Jacob, we're going to see Jacob prosper today. He doesn't prosper because he's clever, even though we know Jacob is clever. He doesn't prosper because of the strategies that he implements in his life. We're going to see the strategies that he implements in this passage are ridiculous. The reason Jacob prospers, here's the big takeaway, it's because God decided he would. That's the big lesson. God promised that Jacob would prosper, and now we are seeing that promise being fulfilled in the life of Jacob. He's going to prosper, but not because of anything about Jacob. Jacob does all of the wrong things, especially Jacob. He's going to prosper because God decided he would. Look at verses 25 through 26 in chapter 30 just to get going. It might be titled, this paragraph is actually titled in my Bible, Jacob's Prosperity. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given to you." So after Joseph's born, Jacob's up to 11 kids. He's been working his butt off for years. Remember, like 7 years for Rachel, 7 years for Leah. He's been working his butt off, and this entire time, Laban's been prospering because Jacob's been a slave. He's been paying off his debt. He's an indentured servant to Laban. He's been working just for Laban. Laban is the one that's profiting here, and he gets to the point in his life where he's like, I want to prosper on my own. I want to prosper my own household. And so, remember, there's a covenant promise here to Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob. But yet Jacob has nada. He's got nothing. He's just a slave to Laban. Did you notice in verse 26 that he even asks for his own wives and children? Because technically, in that day and age and in that setup there, Laban is the one that even owns the wives because Jacob is his indentured servant. He even owns Jacob's wives and all 11 of his kids. And so he's saying, hey, let me have my freedom. Let me move on in life. I've paid off my debt. Let me leave with my wives and let me leave with my children. You know, it's kind of like some of you have a car payment right now, right? See, you own the car, but not really. Until you make that last payment, they're not going to give you the title to that car. It's the same in Jacob's situation with Laban. He made a deal to be his indentured servant. He made a deal and said, I'm going to work 7 years for Leah, then 7 years for Rachel, and then at the end of which I'll be all paid up, and then you can send me on my way. And so this is the point in which he's finally gotten to. I've paid off my debt, Laban. Let me go. Give me my wives. Give me my kids. Let me get out of here. Send me away that I may go to my own country. Here's Laban's response. Look at verses 27 and 28. But Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages and I'll give it. Laban's acknowledging that he's been blessed ever since Jacob came to town. I am prospering because you're here. And I understand that prosperity of mine is because there is a special blessing on your life. The Lord has blessed me because of you. There's clearly something supernatural taking place here. I think it's interesting to point out the fact that Laban understands this and recognizes this. He acknowledges that something supernatural has taken place since Jacob has showed up. And so he wants to leverage that to continue to get that blessing. This tells you everything you need to know about Laban. He acknowledges the work of God. He acknowledges the power of God and what God is doing, but he's not interested in worshiping God. Laban's worried about Laban. And I think that would describe a lot of religious people. You hear a lot of people complain about God because everybody wants the blessings of God, but do they want to acknowledge and honor God and worship God? Well, they're not so much caught up in that conversation, but they really want the blessings of God. That's all Laban knows. I got the blessings of God because you're here. So that's all I care about. I'm not going to get on my knees and acknowledge God in a way that I'm going to worship him and he's going to be my God and I'm going to be his people. I'm not interested in any of that. I just want to manipulate this situation in which I can continue to get these blessings that have been caused by your presence in my household. So please, name your price. What do you need? You need a raise? Tell me what you need to stick around here. And Jacob, as we're getting ready to see, he's only interested in his freedom at this point. I don't want a raise. I don't want a bigger paycheck. I want my freedom. I've met my obligation. Look at verses 29 and 30. Jacob said to him, you yourself know how I have served you and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also? It's like, hey, you and I both know. You just admitted it, and I know it's true too. You're being blessed because I'm here, but listen, I'm not going to serve you forever. I don't want to be your slave for the rest of my life. I want to have my own household. I want to take care of my own people. I don't want to be your slave. I want to be free. Now, here's a cultural detail that you need to understand for all of this to make more sense to you. Cultural context really matters. In that day and age, there's this detail that if you had an arrangement in which you said, hey, I'm going to be your slave for the next 14 years if you give me X, Y, and Z. If you made that arrangement and agreed to be someone's indentured servant like that, at the end of that time, once you met your obligations, you met all 14 years, customarily, you would be given a gift from your master to help you on your way. You have this newfound freedom, you've met your obligation, and so your master would give you a gift to help you start your life of freedom. That is what Jacob is asking for, and that's what Laban doesn't want to acknowledge and give into right here. Now, you got a homework text right here. There's an example of this spelled out in Scripture. Sometimes I give homework texts. This is something you can read on your own later. Later in the law, you'll see this customary arrangement actually spelled out in the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 15, 12 through 14, if you have time to read that on your own. Deuteronomy 15, verses 12 through 14. You'll see where it actually is spelled out in the law that if you're living in one of these arrangements, when a slave is let go, they've met their obligation, they are to be given a gift. They are to be given a sum of something in order for them, and as a reward for living up to the obligation that they agreed to. That's what Laban That's what Jacob is asking Laban for. He's like, we're at this stage. I don't want to raise. I want my freedom. And so Laban's like, okay, he's given into it now. Look at verses 31. He said, what shall I give you? Jacob said, you shall not give me anything if you will do this for me. I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they will be my wages. So my honesty will answer me later. When you come and look into my wages, when you come to look into my wages with you, everyone that is not speckled or spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. Laban said, good, let it be of you as you have said. So here again, they're agreeing upon this departure gift. Laban's like, what am I going to give you? Okay, we're there, we're to that point. Jacob's like, okay, I got a deal. I got an idea. I'm gonna pass through all of your flock, and I'm gonna remove all of the speckled and spotted sheep, or all of the black lambs. Now pause for a second. Imagine in your mind a sheep. Visualize a sheep in your mind. I bet you were all visualizing exactly the same thing. We see a sheep that is completely white. How many speckled and spotted sheep have you ever seen? Because for me, I've not seen any. They do exist, but evidently not in the neck of the woods I've been growing up in. So we're talking about something that is rare. A small percentage of all of these sheep. That's what he's asking for. In addition to that, all of the spotted and speckled among the goats. How many spotted and speckled goats have you seen? Well, I've seen a lot of those actually. But in this part of the world in this time, most of the goats were all brown or black. That was like 80% of all of the goats, and it's still a high percentage today. But the spotted and speckled goats are really rare. This would be like Jacob saying, here's my idea, Laban. As my parting gift, I just need 10% of the flock. That's all I'm asking for. And the way that we'll determine that 10% is all of the rare spotted animals amongst the livestock. Those will be the ones that I'll take. And it would roughly be around 10, maybe at best 20%. And so Jacob's like, I'll do all of the sorting. I'll pasture this flock. I'll take care of them until I get the right amount, until enough of the spotted and speckled animals are there to where I feel like I can make this next step in life, to where I can start my life of freedom with enough resources to actually make it. So as soon as Laban hears this, he's like, good, let it be as you have said. Now, if we were reading that in Hebrew, it would pop off the page. It would be like Laban saying, hot dog, let's do it. That's a great deal. It was really loud in the Hebrew. He is especially excited about this particular deal that Jacob has suggested right here. Now, you ever make a deal with someone that's got kind of a shady reputation like Laban, and they get really, really excited about the deal you're getting ready to make with them? Wouldn't that kind of make you give them the stank eye? Laban's like really excited. Why is Laban so overjoyed about this percentage of his flock being given to Jacob? Well, that's because Laban's doing what Laban's always done. He's a schemer. He's a trickster. He's a step ahead of Jacob all the way. Look what he does in verses 35 and 36. But that day, Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. He rigged the game. Laban's like, yeah, I'll take that deal all day. And then immediately he removed that percentage of his livestock, all of the spotted and speckled animals. He gave them to his boys and said, hey, listen, get out of here. Go, 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 go. So that way, when Jacob showed up to start this process of this deal that they struck with one another, that he would be starting at zero when it came to earning his freedom. This last little bit of gesture right here is starting at zero. It doesn't tell us, it doesn't give us the detail of Jacob's response or his reaction whenever he went up to this livestock, later that day or the next day. I mean, can you imagine the heartbreak, though? He was this close. He struck a deal. He was getting ready to get a taste of freedom for the first time in a long time. He shows up and he looks at the livestock, and of course, Laban did it again. So now, Jacob is in a situation where he's got to work for years more of slavery to Uncle Laban, because it's going to take years before he has the spotted and speckled sheep that he would need to survive. You ever had a moment like that in your life when you're trying so hard to get ahead? You're striving and you're striving and you're striving, and it seems like the harder you try, the closer you get, the further away you are. Like the odds are just stacked against you more than they were before. That's the type of moment Jacob is having here. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do in those moments? Well, we know what Jacob did. He just put his head down and he got to work, and he started pasturing the flock, shepherding that flock and taking care of them, and started the breeding process to hopefully get enough resources at some point. But I want you to remember something that we talked about at the very beginning of the sermon. God made a promise to Jacob, didn't he? I promise you're going to prosper. And so if God promised that Jacob was going to prosper, that's what's going to happen. Romans 8:31, Paul says, if God is for us, who can stand against us? Now Jacob never read that verse. That'd be thousands of years in his future. But he could have used that verse that day. Hey, if God is for you, who can stand against you? Laban? Now, we're going to read what Jacob did in verses 37 through 43 in order to understand the strategy he implemented to get spotted and speckled sheep. He implemented this breeding technique. Now, I don't care if your reading comprehension is off the charts. If you've never read this paragraph before, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Like, it is a really confusing place in the Bible to read. Okay, so it seems like every week I'll have someone say to me, Pastor, I want to read the Bible. I try to read the Bible, but I read it and it's complicated and I get confused. I don't understand. It's paragraphs like the one we're getting ready to read. That's why people say that, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so you probably have to read it several times. I think I read it like 50 times last week, and then they had to just jump into a lot of different commentaries to even figure out what's going on. So I did a lot of homework for you. I'm going to share that homework with you today. I'm going to be the kid, the nerd that can share the homework so you can still understand the assignment here. But I want to tell you, it is confusing. But here's what Jacob does in verses 37 through 43 in order that these goats and these sheep produce spotted and speckled animals. Are you ready for it? Here we go. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places, where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But the feebler of the flock, he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus, The man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys. Did you get all that? Clear as mud, right? Woo! You read that and you're like, when you're in your 1-year reading plan, you do get to a paragraph like that and you're like, all right, I'm just going to keep going. That's basically what we do in a moment like that. Well, we know verse 43 says, thus the man, speaking of Jacob, increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants and camels and donkeys. He prospered greatly. So here's the question we need to answer. How did he prosper this way? How did Jacob prosper? Was it his breeding techniques? Did you catch what was happening there? I started to catch on about the 50th time I read it. Step one, you just get poplar branches and almond branches and whatever plane tree branches are, and you peel away the bark, and so you got streaks in them. And the idea here is that you're taking these peeled sticks and you're going to set them near where the animals breed. Where do they typically mate? Well, they like to get it on near the watering troughs. So you're going to set all these sticks that the bark is peeled back, where you got stripes on them and stuff. You got to set up all the sticks in front of the watering troughs, so when they get it on, they're looking at the striped sticks, and they start to have striped babies. Spotted, speckled. You get a black sheep here and there. So you start to get, when you do this over and over, and then the ones that aren't doing it right, you get rid of them, put them in the feebler pack, right? And then you leave the stronger ones there, the speckled ones there, the hybrids, I guess you'd say, and you keep repeating this exercise over and over and over, and you get more and more of these abnormalities. And so once you finally wrap your mind around what's happening, that there is this practice in which something that the sheep and the goats can visually see while they're mating is going to impact the genetics of their offspring. That's the practice. Here's the craziest thing about the whole paragraph. It works. That's the craziest thing about this paragraph. It actually works. How did Jacob prosper? Well, I can tell you how he didn't prosper. He didn't prosper because of the stupid sticks. That's ridiculous. That's nonsense. The reason, I don't know a lot about genetics. Really all I could tell you about genetics is the word genetics. That's the extent of my knowledge when it comes to genetics. But I can tell you the reason why, you can talk to all the farmers you want, the reason why none of them have sticks with the bark peeled off in front of the watering troughs to get, all of these color abnormalities. The reason nobody's doing that today is because it's ridiculous. I remember when I was in 5th grade, I had 4 giant warts on my wrist that were bothering me. I don't know if you ever experienced this as a kid. If you notice, they're not there right now. I had these 4 big old warts, and I used to spend a lot of the after-school time in summer months with my great-grandma Fiddler, who I miss. She's up in heaven now. And I remember complaining about these 4 warts to my grandma and showing her. And she's like, well, you know how we got rid of warts back in my day. And I'm like, no, I have no idea. Oh, are you talking about the 30s and 40s? Well, I don't know what's going on. She said, you get a potato and you cut it in half and you rub the potato on the warts. And then you wait for a full moon and you bury the potato in the backyard on the full moon, and your warts will go away. So you know what I did? There was a full moon that day. She was making mashed potatoes. There were potatoes there. And so I grabbed the potato, I rubbed it all over those warts, and I buried it in the backyard. And I want to tell you what, over the coming months, over that summer, my warts fell off, and I have no warts on my wrist, as you can plainly see. Beautiful skin right here. Did I learn how to unlock the power of potatoes and moonlight? Is that what happened? Is that what happened? No, my grandma was messing with me, is what happened, which is why I loved her so much. And it just happened that I timed it perfectly with my body's immune system that finally figured out there was warts on me and killed them. You know, when you dig into the commentaries about these breeding techniques, it's really interesting to hear what scholars have to say as they try to decipher what is happening here. But they all essentially say the same thing. Matter of fact, if you go back into ancient commentaries and you look at what ancient Hebrews would even say about Jacob's attempt to breed these animals and get these results, everyone unanimously says this is folklore of the day. This is just the folklore of the day. This is how you would get abnormalities in breeding. And so, in the same way that in the previous chapter, you remember that Rachel believed mandrakes were a fertility drug. There's no science behind that, and they're not fertility drugs. Well, in the same way that she believed that folklore, Jacob also believed some folklore when it comes to breeding animals and getting these results, these hybrids. So, let me ask the question again. How did Jacob prosper? Well, his superstition didn't have anything to do with it. He prospered because of God's sovereignty. He prospered because God decided he would prosper. And I think the purpose of these peeled sticks in this story, I think it's God's way of proving to us that Jacob's prosperity didn't have anything to do with Jacob and what he was doing. It's ridiculous. It's not the sticks. Jacob's prosperity didn't have anything to do with Jacob's effort. Look at the effort in Jacob's life, the life that he lived, all the mistakes that he made, all the attempts to prosper gone wrong. He made all of these bad deals, Laban sabotaging him, the breeding strategies, pure nonsense. Yet it all worked. The method doesn't match the results. How did he prosper? It's because God determined that he would. If God is for Jacob, none of the other factors mattered. Not Laban, not the sticks, not Jacob. God decided he was for Jacob. God decided he favored Jacob. God decided he was going to show Jacob grace. And so many of us in here, especially seasoned believers in this room, would share this sentiment. You can look back, especially the older saints in here. You can look back at your life and you can see how things went right. And then you think about your expertise and your effort to make sure that things went right when they did go right. And now you know it didn't have anything to do with you. You look back now and you're like, the only explanation I can give is God, because now I'm older and wiser and know that I didn't know anything. I didn't know what was going on, yet I was blessed in this amazing way. Doesn't mean everything went right in your life, but something good like that happening in your life, we ultimately need to credit God for those things. There's no better example, I think, in my own life than this church right here. I mean, when I think about our church being in existence for over 13 years and looking back at how we started, like, wow, God just blessed us. He just decided to bless us. That's the only explanation I can give. I look at how much money we had, $0. I look at how much expertise I had in church planting, none. I looked at my master plan. If you looked at my master plan back in 2012, whenever we launched, it wasn't much of a plan. We didn't even know where we were going to meet 2 weeks out before the launch. It was all falling through. Every measurable standard I can look at as to why someone should succeed or why a ministry would succeed, like, we failed every measurable standard. I've spent years coaching younger church planters and guys, and they'll say, hey, what do I need to do? And I'll examine their life, and I'll look at what they've gotten ready, and I'll see that they got more money in the bank. They're better preachers than me. They have surrounded themselves with great leaders, and they're not here, and we are. Why? Why have we succeeded? Why are we still here? All I can tell you now, I know enough now to know it's just the grace of God. And again, you could all look in examples in your own life, and you'd say the same thing. Oh, you have no idea, Pastor. When I look at how this unfolded in my life, it's by the grace of God I'm here right now. It's by the grace of God I have this experience and have this life. James 1:17 says it perfectly. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Every success in our life, every provision, all of the good, all of the relationships we cherish, ultimately we thank God for all of those because it's his grace in our life that we get to have those experiences. And I think the longer you live, the longer you realize that's true. God's taking care of us. He takes care of his people. Now, when it comes to our salvation, this is especially the case. How come you're a believer and other people in your life are not believers? How come you're right with God, but other people in your life aren't right with God? Why am I right with God? Is it because I'm smarter? No. I've met a lot of people that are smarter than me that aren't right with God. It has nothing to do with our IQ. You know, I'm not right with God because of the way I live a moral life, because I know a lot of other people who are much more moral than me, but they are not right with God. You got all kinds of people in other pagan religions and philosophies that I think that if you put my life up next to theirs and you compared us, you would say, wow, they are much more moral than this pastor. So why are we right with God and they're not? It's grace. We're not right with God because we're clever or because we're extra religious. It's grace. I can't achieve my salvation any more than Jacob can breed spotted goats with sticks. I can't do it. I'm saved by the grace of God alone, and so are you. We have the favor of God upon us through Christ. It's belief in Jesus. I'm not saved because of anything else but the grace of God. And I can believe in this promise that we put our faith in, that God is faithful to fulfill this salvation through these promises through his son Jesus. He keeps his word every single time. So we come back to the table to think about what Christ has done. We don't come to the table to think about what we've done. We don't come to the table to think about our morality, our religiosity. We don't come to the table to think about our intelligence. We come to the table to think about the works of Christ alone, because it's the only explanation we have for our salvation. And so we're going to hold the gospel in our hand, the life of Christ, everything that he did, his sinless life, the blood shed on the cross that atoned for all of our sins, past, present, and future. That's the only answer. It's grace alone, through faith alone, and the works of Christ alone. And this moment in the life of Jacob is just another opportunity to remember that. So let's take communion, let's remember this truth that saves us, and let's be grateful to God and his provision of salvation in our lives. Lord, again, I thank you for a season of study through the book of Genesis, that we can take a look into all of these different moments that you share about the patriarchs. Lord, help us, Lord, to just, we want to look under every rock. We want to gain every jewel that's there in all of these moments, even the seemingly obscure experience that Jacob had near the end of his time with Laban. Lord, there's truth in it here that we need to guide us. And I think the truth today is that we need assurance that, Lord, you are enough. You are enough. And when it comes to our salvation, who you are and what you've done, that's where our hope is. That is sufficient for our salvation. Lord, we thank you that we don't have to put faith in our works and our deeds and our ability to know enough or know more than the guy beside us. We put faith in what you've done, and that's it. Father, as we take communion, help us to remember this truth and just meditate upon it in a way that would change how we think and live. In Jesus' name we pray.